In this listening and clear speaking course, we will be taking a look at strategies to improve the pronunciation in each module. In Module 1, we looked at some general issues related to improving pronunciation, some terminology, and some websites you could use to practice. Now, in Module 2, we're going to start looking at specific parts of suprasegmental pronunciation, and we're starting with word and sentence stress. Remember, in a diverse country like Canada, many people speak English with an accent different to the mainstream Canadian English accent. I'm one of them. This course is not focused on reducing accent, rather helping you develop intelligible speech so that your message and purpose for communication can be understood. So, word stress. Word stress is about how much emphasis we put on a word and within a word. So every word that has more than one syllable in the English language has one of those syllables that gets more stress than any others. Before we go on, do you know what a syllable is? A syllable is kind of like the beat of a word, the beat of a drum. So when we say a word like obstruction, how many syllables is that? Obstruction. I'll say it one more time. Obstruction. Here I've written down the word with these double lines to show the gap between each of the syllables. And there are 3. Obstruction. I'm really slowing it down now. It's much harder to hear sometimes when people speak at regular speed. Let's look at another one. How about the word ventilate? How many syllables is that? Ventilate. So I've written it here for you. Ventilate. 3 beats of that drum. Ventilate. Can you hear them? So in a word that has more than one syllable, we now know that one of those syllables will get the most stress. Listen while I read this list of words. Obstruction, ventilate, unconscious, compression, abdominal. Can you hear that syllable which has the most stress? I've underlined it in these examples. Obstruction, ventilate, unconscious, compression, abdominal. Word stress is important because stress is such an important part of English pronunciation. If you stress the right part of a word, it really improves your comprehensibility. That means how hard people have to work to understand you. Later on, we're going to see how stressing the right word in a sentence also improves your overall comprehensibility. Some English language learners think that if they stress each sound in a word or each word in a sentence equally, it will make them easier to understand. Sometimes it makes it harder to understand someone. Or even worse, it can make it seem like you're really angry or very insistent about something. We use this kind of even word stress when we're about to lose our temper in English. So in fact, using even word stress not only can be confusing, but also might lead to other people to think that you feel differently than you really do. So it's very important to listen for word stress and try to use the correct word stress yourself. So I want to really explain to you how we stress a syllable or how we stress a word. It's one thing to say it, but I want to explain how we actually do it. And there are 3 ways. It's about the length of the sound of the syllable, how clearly we pronounce the verb, the vowel of the syllable, and the pitch, how high or how low that stressed syllable is. Now, it's a lot to think about when you're speaking. How do you emphasize one syllable in a word? Really, all I want you to do is to be thinking about this while you're listening, and your brain is going to figure it out. As you listen and pay attention to the correct word stress, your brain will start to repeat that word stress when you're speaking. I think just knowing different word stress is really step 1. So thinking about length, clarity, and pitch, let's go back to that word obstruction. So we know in the word obstruction that struck is the syllable that is emphasized. Listen again. Obstruction. Now let's think about length, clarity, and pitch of that one syllable, struck. Obstruction. Can you hear? Struck lasts for longer than the other syllables. Obstruction. How about clarity? This one's a really interesting one. Obstruction. Compared to the other vowels in the word, the of struck is much more clearly spoken than any other vowel, especially compare it to that first O, obstruction. It's almost like I kind of muddied up or mixed up that obstruction. And lastly, pitch. What you should be able to hear is that struck is a little bit higher. If I was singing a song, right, it would be a little bit higher than the other syllables in the word. Obstruction. Can you hear that? Now, there's a really important part about word stress. It's not just about stressing or emphasizing that one syllable. In fact, you have to de-stress or de-emphasize the other syllables in a word. Otherwise, I can't hear it. So I like this expression to muddy up. Like think of a clear puddle, and you put your boot in the puddle and you mix it up, and suddenly it's kind of muddy. You can't see the bottom, you can't see what's in the water anymore. And that's a kind of really good expression for what we do with the other syllables in a word that are not stressed. They have low pitch, they have a short sound, and they're quite unclear when it comes to clarity of the vowels. So let's listen again and just think about that. Obstruction. Obstruction. Can you hear how I don't even really pronounce the O? Instead of saying ob, I say ob. It's a bit muddy, right? And it's lower. Ob and shun are lower than struck, which is higher. Obstruction. So that gives you some idea about how we actually make word stress. Now we're going to look at some more examples. You don't have to memorize these. It's really just about starting to think about these kinds of examples when you're listening and speaking. So when we're talking about word stress, let's have a look at these letters, B-A-L-L. Now on their own, they make the word ball. Ball is a one-syllable word, so obviously the stress is even. But we could take those four letters, B-A-L-L, and make the word balloon. Now listen to the difference in those four letters between these two words. In the word balloon, the emphasis, the stress is on loon, ball, balloon, ball, balloon. Can you hear how those four letters are quite different when they're spoken as part of a multi-syllable word? Couple more examples. Let's look at the word fast. Fast forward to the favorite part of the video. Or the word breakfast. Now in the word breakfast, this is a two-syllable word and the emphasis is on break. So listen to just those four letters, F-A-S-T, and see how they're so different from a one-syllable word into a de-stressed two-syllable word. Fast. Breakfast. Fast. Breakfast. So the A is much less clear, much quicker, and also the pitch is lower. It's kind of muddy. And here's the last example. If we look at the word late, this is something that drives me crazy. I'm always on time, so late. Now let's compare those four letters, L-A-T-E, when they're part of a multi-syllable word where this syllable is not getting the stress. Chocolate. Now chocolate, delicious, something I do appreciate. The emphasis, the stress is on chocolate, the first syllable. Listen to what happens to those four letters. Late, chocolate. Really quite different. So again, I'm not asking you to memorize this. It's really just part of understanding and coming to realize that word stress is just very different. the letters don't make the word stress always, and depending on if those letters are part of a stressed or a de-stressed syllable will really affect the way we pronounce them. So when we're speaking in English, we still kind of use sentences or parts of sentences just like when we're writing. But for each sentence, we have different kind of chunks, thoughts, clauses, and phrases. And each one of those chunks of ideas, we call those a thought group. We don't worry about full stops and commas when we're speaking. That's one thing we don't have to worry about. Within each thought group in an English sentence, there's a focus word. Only the words that are focus words get stress. So we know that when we talk about stress, we also need to talk about what words will be de-emphasized, just like in word stress. In an English sentence, the stress is placed on the content words. Those are the words that really give us the nuts and bolts, I call it, like the core of the information, the thing that we need. These include nouns, verbs, adjectives, and adverbs. When you think about it, these are the words that carry the message. These are the words that carry the information. So those are the important words, and those are the words that get the stress. The de-emphasized words include function words. Some people call them structure words, and other people call them grammar words. So those are words like prepositions, in, on, at, pronouns, him, his, articles, a, the, conjunctions, and, but, or auxiliary verbs, has, am, was. These words follow the same rule as the syllables in the word. De-emphasized words are spoken a bit quieter, spoken with a bit less clarity, and are a bit lower in pitch. Again, if you emphasize every word equally, it doesn't make you easier to understand. See, it just kind of makes you sound mad. There is a PDF on the Moodle page called word-stress-terminology.pdf. It has 24 words from the medical terminology course. Take a look at that PDF now. Look at each word. You'll see that I've highlighted the syllable in each word that is stressed. Listen as I read them. Pause this PowerPoint video, look at the PDF, and practice the words yourself. Angina, myocardial infarction, die, gastroesophageal reflux, hypertension, hypotension, cerebrovascular accident, flatulence, arrhythmia, fracture, cystitis, malignancy, thrombosis, influenza, dentures, extremity, superior, integument, vertebral column, lumbar area, trachea, sternum, anterior, abdomen. Practice, practice. Practice word stress as much as you need. Go back to the audios from anywhere in this course, any of the modules, and as you are listening, read along with the audio. Read along with me when I'm reading the PowerPoints. This technique is called shadowing. You're like the shadow of the person speaking. It's going to be very helpful for you to practice sentence stress, intonation, and word thought groups as we move through the pronunciation topics in the modules. You can even watch videos on YouTube. Read along with the captions. In the next module, we'll be talking about thought groups in more detail, and we'll practice sentence stress again.